Alright, so welcome to CIS 320. I am Mr. Pap, as you probably know, and what we're going to be doing today is demonstrating how to run 3 OSs in one OS. OS meaning operating system. So the first thing we're going to need to do, I've even uninstalled what I had on here just so I can do this demonstration. We're going to go download VirtualBox. It is a program that's going to make this possible. So we're going to go ahead and just Google search VirtualBox. It should be the first thing that comes up right there. And go to downloads on the left side here. If you are on Windows, this top one will always be the most current, so I would recommend going with the current version here. But if you're on Windows, hit Windows hosts. If you're on Mac, hit OS X hosts. If you're running a weird like Kali Linux or Ubuntu, some Linux distribution, you want to click Linux distributions. You're also going to want to download this extension pack. All supported platforms. You just click that little button. So I'm going to go ahead and, because I'm on Windows, go ahead and save that and also that over here. And just while these are downloading, because the VirtualBox is about 118 megabytes, just to tell you guys what I'm running with here. This is an old Walmart computer that I'm working with. Not really old, well, okay, in the realm of technology it is. It's like 5-6 years old now. But I bought it for $400. It's a desktop, and I don't think that's the right thing. It is not the greatest system on the planet. As you can see, AMD processor, 3.59 gigahertz, which is good, but 6 gigs of RAM. And like I said, it's a Walmart computer. It came with 350 watt processor, or I'm sorry, 350 watt power supply. I swapped it out for a 550, and added a graphics card. But other than that, this is not a good computer, is my point, right? So the computers in DePaul 102 have 16 gigs of RAM as of right now, as of this recording. So I just clicked on the VirtualBox exe first. I'm gonna hit next, hit next. A lot of this stuff is just standard. That's fine. Proceed, install. A lot of the stuff you should just click through, but the important part, you should read everything, right? A lot of these programs might come with like extra, like install this, and it's like a Yahoo changing your home page and all that. Nobody wants that, right? So just gonna wait until this installs. During this process, you might actually see your computer doing some funky stuff, right? My taskbar down here glitched a little bit. That's normal. What it's doing is installing network adapters and basically methods of which it can run multiple operating systems within your operating system. So that's why your computer kind of like glitches at the first handle of it. But it is not damaging to a computer, right? You can have these on either Windows or OS X. The worst they'll do is freeze your computer, but you can always just restart and then no damage done. Okay, so this is actually telling me I already have the old one, the old extension pack downloaded, but we're not going to download that one. We're going to go ahead and just show you how to install the one we downloaded. So all you're going to want to do is go to File, Import Appliance, I believe. I don't think that's the right one, actually. There's a random option of how to tell it that thing exists. I think it's in Preferences, Extensions. There we go. Okay, so you go to File, Preferences, and then Extensions tab. Okay, I'm gonna remove the one that I had before. I'm now gonna try to add the one that I downloaded, which is called Oracle VM Extension Pack. It's on my desktop, so it just found it. Right. Might take a second. Gotta hit install and then agree to all the terms and conditions. Scroll to the bottom. Yada yada yada. So it's gonna go ahead and install this. What this is gonna basically allow for is just for us to do what we want to do. Right. Now I do have 3 saved instances already in the left side here. Right. These Glenn. Glenn's my first name, by the way. I'm going to leave those be just because those are ones I'm currently working with. I'm going to show you guys how to do this from scratch. Okay, I don't know why my window's not showing up there. There we go. All right, so this is VirtualBox. Welcome. Now, when you guys download this, you're gonna hopefully have 3 files already downloaded, right? You're gonna have pfSense, which is pfSense.org, and then there should be a download tab once the page loads up. Then you can just select, you know, you're installing it, 32 or 64-bit right there, and then gives you these options. You're going to want the ISO. Right, ISO is a CD image. This will give you an .img file, which is pretty much just used for USB sticks. So you're going to want to click the ISO one. Okay. But then the other 2 files you should actually have gotten from Microsoft Imagine. So if you do not know what that is, you should be sending me an email. I actually manage the Microsoft Imagine account for Niagara, so I can get you an account, and then you can get these other 2 files I'm going to reference downloaded. Okay. So first things first, let's go ahead and hit new. Right now, I know you guys are not going to have anything here. That's fine. So hit new. Name and operating system. So the first time you do this, you're going to want to type your first name, space, and then the name of the operating system you're installing. So for the first one I'm going to do is pfSense. So I'm just going to do Glenn. I'm going to put a 1 there because I already have a Glenn pfSense saved, so it's not going to, you know, same file names, yada yada. Glenn 1 pfSense. Okay, now pfSense is a BSD operating system. Okay, and it is a 64-bit operating system of FreeBSD that I downloaded. So once again, pfSense is BSD, FreeBSD, 64-bit. If you download a 32-bit version, obviously you're going to want to go with 32-bit, but go ahead and click next. Now it's saying the recommended memory for this is 1024 megabytes. I only have 6 gigabytes of RAM, right? So 6144 right there. You want to generally leave enough RAM for your host operating system. So in other words, Windows, my version of Windows that I'm working with right here. Hello. You want to leave enough RAM for that one to sustain life. You want to leave enough RAM for it to basically be able to do what it needs to do, right? So pretty much you want to go as low as you can possibly go with these. pfSense in particular, I'm going to actually drag this down to 512. Your pfSense box can have 1024 if you have 16 gigabytes of RAM, for instance, but on such a low amount of RAM I have, I'm just going to stick with 512. All right, now this is asking about a hard disk, so you can literally create the hard drive of this computer, this virtual computer. We're going to go ahead and create one, right? And we're just going to use the standard type that they give us, this VirtualBox disk image, right? Now this question is a doozy. This option, dynamically allocated, if you read this, pretty much dedicates an amount of storage to our operating system, but only takes up storage on the physical hard drive as it needs to. So it dynamically allocates, right? Fixed size should optimally run faster. The only problem is this takes longer to create. This takes about 20 minutes to make one. So usually I tell students go ahead and do dynamically allocated unless you have the time and you're really trying to really tinker with it. It's worth it to do the fixed size, but for sake of time I'm going to go ahead with dynamically allocated for all of these I'm showing you today. This one's fine. You can go ahead and click create, and boom, we already have one. Alright, now we are actually not done. We cannot run this just yet. The first thing you should do after you create one of these is go to settings. Now that we're here, we have a bunch of different settings, and this is going to look different depending on what operating system you're on, but it's generally the same thing. Okay. In the general tab, you don't need to do anything except for worry about this. These ones that we set already in the first step, right? If those are wrong, everything else here will be wrong. So you have to make sure that these are correct. System. So now we actually see some really cool stuff, right? We see the boot order and then the different devices and whether or not they're enabled. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncheck floppy because we're not in the 90s anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and leave everything else for now. Processor tab, you don't have to worry about. Everything that usually goes on these two tabs, pretty much keep it the way that it is, okay? Display. So what you want to do is, on this one here, you pretty much want to bring this down as low as you can before you get this indication right here, invalid settings detected. So for me, the number that is the safest, lowest number is 9. I'm going to keep it at 9. If you ever are about to hit OK and you see this is not good. Go back. Something is wrong. Probably going to say that multiple times. But you want to do this for every single operating system we cover. Remote display, however, this is only pfSense, because basically what pfSense is going to do in our little scenario here is act as the gateway, right? It is the gateway between our other operating systems and the outside world's internet, okay? So this is needed to be checked for that, for the VM to give it the capability to do that pretty much, right? So we need to check that. Now if we go down to storage, you see this little CD right here? This is actually our disk drive, like our CD drive in this imaginary virtual computer, okay? If you click that and then click over here, I can now pretty much put a CD in, right? We just downloaded that CD image, that pfSense image, so I'm going to go ahead and attach that. You might not have it on the list like I do. You might have to go up here to choose virtual optical disk file, and one of these windows opens up. But yeah, right? So another thing, audio. We do not need audio for any of these, right? If you are doing something else in VirtualBox, maybe you're handling like you're doing like a virtual production studio or something like that on a different OS, you need to enable audio, but we're not doing anything with audio. It's literally another resource that's just going to waste our time, because more resources is more time waiting. So go ahead and uncheck that. Okay, so here is the difficult part. Our network adapters, because what we're really doing is networking, right? That's what CIS 320 is. So we have adapter 1. That first adapter on Mac, on OS X, is going to be NAT, all right? On Windows, this is actually going to be bridged adapter. I do not know why. You can actually choose on bridged adapter which what you're talking about here. If I want to go Wi-Fi or my Ethernet, now it just so happens I'm connected to Ethernet, so I'm going to choose my Ethernet. And then for the sake of every time I do this, I don't know why, I always make this allow all. I feel like, especially on Mac, this is a little touchy setting, and sometimes the internet doesn't work as it should, even though all the settings are correct. So that's a good, safe thing to do. Just check all of those, allow all in the advanced for all of the network things that let you. If it doesn't let you, then it's fine. I know that, like, I think NAT on Mac OS X does not let you edit this, but it's okay. For pfSense only, we're going to want 2 adapters. So the other ones are just going to have 1. We're actually going to put 2 network cards, imaginary cards, in this pfSense box. We're going to put the one to the outside world, and then we need 1 for the inside world. The inside world being our network, right? So we're going to do an internal network. I'm going to go ahead and also do allow all there. And this name here is going to be the name of our internal network. So the internal network I have going on up here for these 3 is also intnet, because that is the default of what VirtualBox assigns you. It's going to mess with these, right? These are saved, meaning that they're still actually running. They're just, the state of them is saved. They're not actually like taking up any resources in my computer. But they're still technically running. So pfSense, if we set this to the same thing, we'll see those like it's also on this network. We don't want that. So I'm going to name this something completely random. My daughter's name is Serena, so I'm going to type in Serena, okay? That's going to be my name now for all the other boxes I create here. These the Windows Server, Windows 7, pfSense. All right. Serial ports, don't worry about. USB ports, you should enable, unenable these if you can. I know that sometimes the Windows Server and 7 do not let you do this. If it gives you that invalid settings, you don't want that to come up. So enable this if you can. And then these two we don't have to worry about. So as of right now, we're done. We're done with that pfSense box. We can go ahead and double click it and get this thing to open up here. Might take a second on my dinosaur, but this right here is a splash screen, what you just saw. Remember that. Okay, so this is pfSense. Now, just so you know, your host key for pfSense and all other VMs for VirtualBox, the actual program that we downloaded here, is going to be right on the bottom. Mine is right control, right? So if I press that and the S button, oh, I'm sorry, that and the C button, it'll actually give me what is called scaled mode. So really quickly, just because I explained some things about that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this machine and let it restart so I can keep talking about what is happening there in pfSense as it boots up. So I'm going to start this again. So pfSense is starting up, and I'm already in scaled mode. So before, when I clicked the big button, right, it wasn't big, now it's big, right? So this is the home menu. It's going to auto boot. You should let it auto boot. Don't touch anything here. Now, I cannot explain this to you in any other way except you're going to see it boot up. It's going to do a bunch of white text, just like it is. And then it's going to switch to gray. Should switch to gray in a second. Look at that. Now, in a second, there's going to be another countdown. See this right here? This little countdown. 8, 7, right? So here you want to hit the letter I. Go ahead and hit that letter I. Okay, what we just did is enter installer mode. This pfSense is like Windows DOS back in the day before nice mouses, you know, it was just keyboard. That's what pfSense is. So, unfortunately, you're gonna have to get used to this for the sake of this course, but this is the only time we really do this type of stuff. So for this screen, go ahead and scroll down to accept these settings with your keyboard. You can't use your mouse, like I said, okay? No mouse. And hit enter. Now, the next option, you're going to want to choose Quick Easy Install, and then hit OK. It's basically going to tell you, are you sure you want to do this? Because you're really installing things right now. That's fine. Another quick thing, that host key I talked about, right? So mine is right control. I believe by default on Mac, I believe it's the left command button. If you click inside of here, oh, my mouse disappeared. If you tap that host key one time, your mouse comes back. Okay, let me repeat that. If I click, my mouse has disappeared. My mouse is no longer a thing. If I tap this button again, that host key, it came back. Okay. You're gonna see a thing here about install kernel. You want to hit standard kernel. Now the last little thing about VirtualBox that I need to talk to you about is let me get out of this scaled mode. All right, so I'm gonna hit Control S again. It's gonna go back to the regular. I'm sorry, Control C. I did that twice now, and it goes back to the regular way of looking at it, right, with this menu here. So what is now telling me is that it's about to be shut down. So just specifically for this right now in what we're doing. Right, pfSense, we just installed it. There is a menu option that we need to do, and it is a time-sensitive thing. Okay, so this devices menu, optical drives, remove disk from virtual drive. Remember this button, okay? Because pretty much that splash screen that I referenced when we first started this is going to show up again. When that splash screen shows up, we need to click this button while it is on the splash screen. Okay, so watch how I do it. Oh, I clicked in there. All right, so I'm gonna hit reboot, enter. Okay, now I'm gonna go up to this menu and I'm gonna hold my mouse over it, get ready for it. Okay, now it says in the background, pfSense is now rebooting. So as soon as I see that little square box, that VirtualBox logo right there, I click it. Okay, now I can just literally sit here and wait. pfSense should boot up as normal, and then we can get into the other ones. So I gave it a second. It's going to do a bunch of code here. Blah, 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 blah. This might go a lot faster on your computers if you're using better computers than me. And look at that. We now have a menu. Okay. So, funny enough, there is no LAN IP address set. Okay, now it just so happens to tell me, hey, you are 192.168.113 on your home network, right? That is my home network IP address right now, my internal to my router at home. So, right, but this thing is a router. So we need to make our own network, which we're doing with that. You know, mine is called Serena, yours might be called something else. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and click set interfaces IP address. But I'm not going to click it. I'm going to actually type in 2. Oh, that is not 2. You have to have the numbers lock on if you do that. 2. Okay? If you type in 2 and hit enter, you are now communicating with this little DOS box pfSense, right? So it's asking me, okay, which one do you want to edit? 1 or 2? The WAN or the LAN? Okay, the WAN, wide area network, is going to be our outside external network. So basically, like I have Verizon Fios, that is my Verizon Fios network. The LAN is this internal VirtualBox network, and that's the one that's blank, so I'm going to go ahead and hit 2 again. Enter the new IP address. So essentially here you have 3 options. You can do Class A, Class B, or Class C private IP addresses. So you can do anywhere in 10, the 10.0.0.x, you know. You can do Class B, which is 172.16, yada yada. Or you could do Class C, which is 192.168.xx. My internal network, or my external network, sorry, already has that 192. So generally speaking, you want to do whatever is not already there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a Class A, because why not? So I'm going to do 10.0.0.1 for mine. Okay, so now this is asking me about what is the subnet bit count. Okay, so the subnet bit count, I might have explained this in class, but you can convert IP address into binary, right? So 255 is pretty much 8 ones, and then 0 is 8 zeros, and whatever happens in between, right? You should have taken notes. But basically, for this specific IP schema, I can tell you that mine is going to be 8, right? Because I am in a Class A. The Class A subnet mask is 255.0.0.0. It literally tells me right there, if I read, that that means 8. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 8. This is now literally telling me, so if you're editing a WAN, do this. If you're editing a LAN, just, this doesn't matter, hit none, hit enter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Oh, I typed a period. This is now telling me to enter the LAN IPv6 address. Don't really care about IPv6 right now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and just basically leave that blank. Now this is asking us, do you want to enable the DHCP server on the LAN? So the DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server, it automatically assigns IP addresses to devices that try to connect to a network, right? So I literally just manually established an IP address up here. So if we have this enabled, it will mess with things. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and hit N for no. We do not want to enable a DHCP server. This option here is now telling us, so basically, like I said, this is a router. So anybody who has tinkered with routers before, they actually come with an IP address, a default one, so it's usually 192.168.1.1 or 0.1. And you basically type that into, you know, say your Google Chrome. I will do it as a example right now. So I believe mine is 1.1. And there we go. This is my Verizon Fios router login page. Okay, so in the same way, this is what pfSense does. pfSense actually will host itself on the network. So we can just type in the VirtualBox IP address and talk to this thing from another virtual machine. Basically what this is saying is, instead of just having me typed in just then, 192.168.1.1, would you rather people have to type in https://192.168.1.1? It'll also encrypt any communication between the device and the router. So if anybody's sniffing the network, they won't be able to see any password information or whatever else. This is always a good thing. So we're gonna go ahead and keep that enabled. So it's saying, do you want to revert back to HTTP? We're gonna say no. And press enter again, and bam, we have the IP address there now. So as far as pfSense is concerned, you're done. No, nothing else. pfSense is all taken care of. You can minimize this, keep it running in the background. It is golden. Okay. So let's go back into VirtualBox. The one thing we do want to check is we're gonna go File, Preferences again, and we're gonna go into Network. All right. For those of you who have Mac, this might look different, but basically you want to find something in host-only networks. This Ethernet adapter or whatever it's listed as, and you're going to want to hit this little paintbrush or whatever is the edit button. And then you're going to want to click DHCP server, and you have to make sure that this is not enabled for the same reasons we just spoke about, right? You do not want DHCP active. It is going to mess with things and override your settings, and then things aren't going to be able to talk to each other, and you're going to come complain to me that it's broken, and I don't want to fix it. So just go ahead and make sure that that is not enabled, okay? Let's go on to the next one. So we are not going to set up Windows Server and Windows 7. Like I said before, these ISOs you should have from Microsoft Imagine. If you don't know what that is, just send me an email or talk to a fellow student. The first one we're going to set up is Windows Server. Okay, so do Glenn 1 again, Windows Server, and the version. Now in this setting, in this VirtualBox program, it's not listed. It hasn't been listed. They're usually not listed. You can just do other Windows and then 32 or 64-bit depending on what you downloaded. I downloaded 64. I recommend you always download 64 when you can. So that's it. Hit next. It's telling me 512. Anybody who knows Windows knows this is way too low. But considering my dilemma of RAM here, I set 512 for pfSense. I'll actually give this one, let's see. I'll give this one like 1500. So then also hit create there. Same settings like I said before. I'm gonna hit dynamically allocated. So that was kind of common sense, and we are back. We have this one, right? So now we go to settings. Everything in this one menu is the same again. I'm gonna uncheck floppy, leave those two alone. The only thing I'm gonna do here is just do that, make sure it's the lowest it can possibly be without activating the invalid settings warning there. That's fine. Once again, I'm gonna go to the CD. Click the CD, and this time I'm going to point it to the Windows Server ISO. If you mess these up, you're going to have like labeling is like the pfSense with Windows Server installed. So you got to make sure that you're keeping those straight, right? Windows Server, there we go. Disable audio or enable audio, unenable. I don't know. I'm not good at English. And then for Windows Server, you're going to want just an internal network adapter, and I'm going to name it to the Serena I've already created before, right? And then in advanced, just click allow all, just because it makes life easier, and I don't need any other adapters there. Serial ports you can leave alone, and then like I said, so I told VirtualBox that I'm trying to do Windows. It sees that, generally speaking, Windows machines have USB. So that's why it demands that you have USB. So Just leave that enabled, and that's fine. So that one is ready to be run. Okay, but I'm actually going to do Windows Server and Windows 7 at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit new again, and I'm just going to make the one for Windows 7, which is literally identical to the one I just made for Windows Server. So, except I'm just going to call it Windows 7, and here I'm going to put Windows 7 64-bit, right? It's already an option. But I'm literally going to do the same thing, so 1500. Yep. It's created. Settings, and then everything's fine here. No floppy. Everything's fine there. This is going to be a little bit higher because Windows 7 had more graphical features. So just leave that as the lowest you can still go, but if it's a little bit higher, it's okay. But that's fine. I'm going to do Windows 7, just unenable audio, internal network, Serena, or whatever you named it to. Allow all. Once again, I can't unenable that, so just leave it, and everything else is fine. Boom. So now, just go ahead and double click both of those, have them run at the same time, and we will go ahead through the install process. So here's our Windows Server machine. And our Windows 7 machine is also right there. So I'm going to actually go ahead and split the screen here so we can see everything going on. I am going to use scaled mode though, because they generally tend to work better in scaled mode. Looks a little bit less sloppy. There we go. So my Windows Server is now on this side. My Windows 7 is on this side, as indicated from up here. Now they're both just going to go ahead and run. Hey, look at that. They loaded about the same time. So gonna go ahead and hit next on both of these screens, and then install now. We're gonna get to a point with both of these setup screens where you're gonna want to go and just walk away and get some coffee. Usually the setup for these takes about 20 to 25 minutes because you're literally installing operating systems, in a fake hard drive on your machine. So this is like although we're doing this virtually, it is still a real thing, right? So for Windows Server, you should have been given a product key from Microsoft Imagine. You can put it in here if you'd like. I'm just gonna hit I don't have a product key because I've done this like 18 million times and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really bother you for a little while. And then here I'm gonna accept the license terms. I'm gonna leave that there for a second. We'll talk about that. But I'm gonna get this one going because this takes way quicker. So this is asking us which type of installation do we want, an upgrade or custom. And then if you read a little bit, install a new copy of Windows. So we made a hard drive, but that hard drive is blank. It doesn't have anything on it. It's not like there was like just a random version of Windows that was like embedded. Like it just came as a default blank. So there's nothing on there, right? So we can't upgrade. We need to hit custom. So now that we're here, you can hit next and it will automatically do this for you, but I want to show you this process while we're watching this video. So if you hit drive options, I see new. I'm going to go ahead and click new and hit apply. To ensure that all Windows features work correctly, Windows might create additional partitions for system files. Cool. I'm going to hit OK. So I wait a second and it literally did exactly what it needed to do for me. Right, it automatically took the amount of space I have, and created what it needed for it to work. Cool. So hit next, and that's it. That's literally it. Now you just wait, and this thing's already installing, right? So let's go back to our Windows Server. We now have 4 options here: standard desktop experience, data center desktop experience. If you choose either one of these without the desktop experience, you will open up your VirtualBox and see a command prompt, and you'll have to do everything in lines of code. We do not want to do that. Okay, desktop experience means the GUI. See, it says down here, GUI, graphical user interface. That basically means I can use a mouse and click on things. We want that. We do not need data center for what we're going to do. It's going to take a little bit longer to install data center, so just go with standard. Hit next. And now this is going to be the same thing as the rest of the Windows 7 installation. So once this loads up, I accept license terms and custom. Okay, I can hit new again, apply, okay, and next. And there we go. So it's around this time you should get some coffee. I'm going to mute my mic. Okay, so welcome back. I did see that the Windows Server had a message like press any key to boot from CD or DVD. Don't press that. Don't press anything. Just let it boot not into CD because it's already installed. So let it do its thing. This one here is also finishing up. So we should be ready to rock and roll here in a second. Windows Server is just kind of starting up. The other one's restarting. It's also good practice to keep an eye on how your host machine is doing. So I'm on a Windows machine. I clicked on the bottom here, and I actually have another program installed called Core Temp, and it basically just measures the temperature of my CPUs. 115 is kind of high, but it's about at the appropriate range for when my Walmart machine here like actually does work. So, but it's always good to keep an eye on it. Windows Server seemingly getting like devices set up and etc., etc. But they are both starting up concurrently next to each other within Windows. How weird is that? So they both also said that do not boot from CD or DVD or press any key to boot. Don't do it for either, like I said. If you do, it'll basically do the loading files screen again and like go through that whole process again. Don't need to do that. That's a waste of time, right? Don't get caught in one of those loops where you're just constantly reinstalling it and being like, why isn't it going into the actual operating system? Just don't press a key during that part. It'll boot into regular Windows. I think Windows Server is actually restarting one more time. Yeah, it is. Wow. See, do not press this. Not surprisingly, I think Windows 7 is going to start up first. Oh, never mind. Yeah, like I said, getting coffee is a valiant part of this. Hey, look at that. We are finally in business. So, this is Windows Server. What we're doing right here is setting a password for an administrator account. This account in particular will be very important, right? We're going to establish what's called a domain. This is basically going to be the password for that domain. Okay, so you generally want to keep passwords in the virtual environment the same. If you start mixing up passwords, you might lock yourself out of different screens, and it's a mess. So for this process, you should just keep usually all the passwords that you put into it the same. So I'm gonna make a password right now. There we go. Still loading up here, but here we go. So I'm going to tell you a very quick thing. So if right now I am obviously not in Windows, right? I have to press Control-Alt-Delete to unlock it. But if I press Control-Alt-Delete on my machine, you're probably not going to see it. But if I do that, it might actually open up to my standard lock, switch user, sign out, task manager, the Control-Alt-Delete of my literal computer, right? The host machine. So using Control-Alt-Delete doesn't work. Does that make sense? What you're going to want to do is you want to press that host key and the delete key, the one that actually says delete, and so not backspace, but the delete key at the same time. So the host key and the delete key functions as Control-Alt-Delete in the VMs. Okay, so after you do that, I'm going to type in the password I just made, hit enter, and Windows Server will boot for the first time. Okay, so Windows Server is very, very different. It is not like Windows 7 in one particular way. It includes Server Manager. Okay, Server Manager is a program that basically is why Windows Server deserves to be its own entity, right? Through this program, you can add roles like being a website host, or doing things that generally a server does, right? Acting as a DNS server. We're going to be doing something called domain services. I believe it's Active Directory Domain Services is the roles that we're going to be adding. And pretty much what that's going to allow us to do is control the Windows 7 machine. Now, I'm assuming all of you who are listening to this video have been in the NU library or used a NU computer. So, first of all, when you log in, when you like scroll over the mouse, you have to usually press Control-Alt-Delete before you can type in your credentials to log into the computer, right? That's usually not like Windows 7 when you buy it from a store, right? We're going to be able to actually do that and see that change in Windows 7. And we're going to be able to control all of that from Windows Server. All right, and just on time, Windows Server is starting up. We're going to have to wait a little bit, right? Be patient with this because it is not easy for one computer to run 3 operating systems at once. Now, it just so happens that, you know, DePaul 102 specifically has beast machines. So this might actually go faster for you, but if you try to do this at home or God forbid like on like a cheap laptop, you know, like it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time. But our Windows inside Windows is finally opened up, right? It's still loading up, but it has officially started. And there is our server manager. So like I said, this program is ridiculous. There are a lot of settings inside of it. It's kind of difficult at first to find your way around, but once you kind of realize where main settings are, it becomes very easy to navigate. So this is going to open up at some point in time. I need to check the process of this video. Oh man, we're at an hour. My apologies for how long it's taken. I'm assuming this video should probably take like a total of like an hour and a half. Alright, so at the same time, we can set up the Windows 7. So I'm going to let this keep loading and just go ahead and set this up. So I'm just going to put Glenn. This right here is not going to matter. This account that you make currently in Windows 7 does not matter at all. It's going to get wiped out as soon as we do the domain stuff. So just keep it as the same credentials as pretty much everything else. Windows 7 makes you type a required password field, so that's what I'm going to put. I'm going to skip activation. That's fine. And let's do it 5 o'clock, sure. Home network, because why not? I believe this is now doing its thing. So let's go over to Windows Server. First thing we're going to want to do, right, configure this local server. It literally tells us. So if you go over to local server, you're going to have to wait a second, but you're going to see a window here with a bunch of different options that you can just control. You can just click on them and change them. These are basically properties for our server. Often the time zone will be wrong, right? So a lot of times Windows doesn't like it when the time zones don't match. So you definitely want to change this to your local time zone. The second thing I always do, just because it makes life a little bit easier in the virtual environment, this IE enhanced security configuration, yeah, that needs to be turned off, because it'll tell you every single time you'd go to a website like google.com or anything that it's not working. Other than that, the only thing that we need to do now is this right here. So if you click on this Ethernet right here, we will now see our one adapter. So right click that and hit properties. Okay, now this is the way that you can change IP addresses in Windows. Okay, so I've opened up the properties of the device I'm using to connect to the internet. Right, this might be Ethernet, this might be a Wi-Fi card, this might be a USB connection, whatever it might be. Right click it, hit properties, and now I'm in this window. I'm gonna change the IPv4 address, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and double click IPv4. And now if I click this, I can literally define my own IP address settings. Cool. So I'm gonna show you the IP address that I'm gonna use. So if you remember, if I look at my pfSense, right, I am at 10.0.0.1. That is the IP address of my pfSense box. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this to 10. Oh, let me make sure my number lock is on. 10.0.0.10. I could do 2. I could do 64. I could do whatever I wanted to, as long as it was distinct and separate from 1, right? And within basically 2 through 254. I could choose any number, right? But it's arbitrary. I'm going to set my server at 10. I'll set my clients at 11, right? But you could just do 1, 2, 3, 4. It automatically is going to detect the subnet mask, which is correct. So cool. The default gateway is actually going to be the IP address of our pfSense box, right? So that was the 10.0.0.1. Now this is the tricky part, but we're going to set this for now. We're not going to have connectivity just yet, but we'll have connectivity once we do some things. Network connectivity, okay? I'm going to go ahead and set this to 127.0.0.1. That's it. I'm going to hit OK, and it is still going to be connected to a network. And I don't know if it's going to, it might not give me internet right now, but like I said, that'll be fixed. So we've set that Ethernet connection, okay? Our second step is to now add some roles and features, okay? So we're going to go to Manage and then Add Roles and Features. This is just a little basic page that explains what this is, but you can skip this page by default if you want to. That way you don't have to see it. I know that we are in a virtual environment, okay, but virtualization within a virtual environment, things start getting confusing. Okay, this assumes you are actually using Windows Server on a natural host, and that you want to create virtual desktop infrastructures on top of that, right? We're just going to do this regular. So you choose this role-based or feature-based installation. Okay, and then it actually sees our server, but our server's IP address is not correct yet, right? Because it is trying to use DHCP and yada yada yada. Let's just leave this for now, and that is our server. We're gonna hit next. All right, so what we're gonna want to do here is click on Active Directory Domain Services. Right, this stores information about objects on the network and makes this information available to users and network administrators. It uses domain controllers to give network users access to permitted resources anywhere on the network through a single logon process. Let's go ahead and just click this. Okay, now as soon as we do, a window is going to come up saying, hey, well, if you mean that you want that, you also need like all of this. So you just hit add features, that's fine. Keep that include management tools checked. And for right now, that is all we are going to need. Okay, hit next, and then you're going to want to make sure group policy management is checked on this next screen. Okay, that is important. If that is not checked, something is wrong. But leave everything else, just hit next. And then this just says, hey, just so you know, you're going to need a DNS server, but if you don't have one, you're going to be prompted, so we're just going to, that's fine. Hit next, and then hit install. Now this will go ahead and install Active Directory Domain Services on this little server manager program, right? So you can actually use them and start to tinker with them. So while that is doing that thing, let's go over here and do some stuff. So this is Windows 7 finally loaded up. So the first thing we're going to want to do is right-click our internet, our Ethernet cord, right? Open Network and Sharing Center, and then change adapter settings. This gets us to the same window that the Ethernet option in local server here got us to, where we could change our IP addresses, right? So here is our local area connection, in other words, our Ethernet connection. If I right click that and hit properties and then double click IPv4, I can now do the same thing here that I did over here. Cool, huh? So we're going to go ahead and type in 10.0.0.11 just because the other one was 10 and then my pfSense box is 1, right? So I want to have it be something different. It automatically is going to calculate that it's a 255.0.0.0. Cool. My default gateway is still 10.0.0.1. And then the DNS server, I'm actually going to point the DNS server to this IP address, the Windows Server one, because remember how the ADDS window just mentioned that we need a DNS server, right? We're actually going to put a DNS server on this machine. So in order for this machine, the Windows 7, to listen to the rules that this thing is putting out, we're going to need to point this machine to that for the DNS server. All right, so that IP address was 10.0.0.10. That's all I need to put there. And I can hit OK. All right, now this is still loading, so I'm going to do one more thing. I'm actually going to, it's a home network we'll just do. Just because home network is usually the one that gives you the least amount of troubles, right? It doesn't, Windows doesn't actively do anything to it, and sometimes for Windows especially, you don't want it to do anything it doesn't need to do. I don't really care about a home group right now, so we're gonna get one more thing set up here. So in Windows 7, you're gonna want to click on the start button here and right click computer, hit properties. So now you get this screen. On the left side here, you're going to see advanced system settings. Go ahead and click that. And then there's a tab up here called computer name. You want to click that. And then finally, a change button on the bottom to rename this computer or change its domain. That's what we want to do, change its domain. So go ahead and hit change. All right, now in a few steps, we're going to go ahead and put a domain here. Okay. Now we're going to be able to hit OK after we put in the domain, and then this computer will get joined to the domain. In the meanwhile, this is finished. This is finished installing, so I can hit close now. But if I look up to this little window here, I got a triangle, a little yellow triangle that wasn't there before. Those are always bad, right? It's like, hey, look at this. Promote this server to a domain controller. That's our next step in doing this. So that's what we need to do. We're going to go ahead and click that. So this is now loading up. And what we're going to want to do here, so we have three options. We can add a domain controller to an existing domain, add a new domain to an existing forest, or add a new forest. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new forest. Okay. So the rule here, you can have this be anything, but there can be no spaces in it, and it has to end in .local. All right, so for the sake of everything, I'm going to put CIS 320.local. Okay, so it should be anything you want here as long as it doesn't have spaces, and I would prefer if it wasn't, like profane. But then you end it with .local and hit next. Make sure that's add a new forest. Okay, so funny story about this next screen. You're supposed to define pretty much what functional level, what operating systems the other this machine and the other machines are using. You can leave these both as the Windows Server technical preview, but like this is Windows Server 2016 I'm on, and for this specific ISO, they didn't change that to Windows 2016. So don't really know why, but we're just gonna leave that as that. You need to make sure that this DNS server is checked. All right, if that is checked, it will automatically install a DNS server for you. If that is not checked, it will not, and things won't work. So this needs to be checked. Down here, you need to input a password for what is called Directory Services Restore Mode. So this is pretty much like the recovery password for your domain, right? I think it should be the same thing as everything else, so that's what I'm going to put it as. And I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Okay, this next screen. Pretty much, if I click show more, this is going to tell me essentially, hey, just so you know, DNS delegation server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found or doesn't. So essentially, it's saying we can't reach the outside world. How domain functioning is supposed to happen, right? I'm supposed to be able to use this domain and look at the outside world and define and like myself as this domain, CIS 320.local. But the .local is why, because .local is not a website, right? It's looking for an actual domain and there's nothing there. So this is fine, right? We can keep this unchecked. We do not check it, we cannot check it, but that's fine. We just hit next. So this is doing math right now. It basically is taking what I gave it, making it all caps, and then removing the .local. So that should be just CIS 320, which it is. This next screen is just going to define some paths of the domain that are going to be actually hosted on this computer. So pretty much these are share folders of the domain. There's a database, log files, both in the Windows/NTDS, and then the sysvol folder. And that's actually a pretty important folder that we might talk about in this video. But it's not going to be until a bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next again. And you can go ahead and scroll down through all of these, but pretty much this is just reviewing what you selected, right? I'm going to go ahead and hit next. It is going to give me some prerequisites. It should alert me about two things. One of them is like a, hey, just so you know, Windows Server 2016 is like the best Windows Server that there's been yet. Yeah, that's this one, right? So it's like has a default security setting named allow cryptography, blah blah blah. This one is about the DNS delegation thing we already talked about, and that's it. So if you only see those two, things are in the clear. You are good to hit install. So now this is going to go ahead and install this last DNS server and promote this entire computer to a domain controller. So essentially, once this does what it needs to do, it's going to ask me to restart. it's going to restart, and when I restart it, it is not going to say just administrator on the login screen. It should say CIS 320/administrator, just like the NU library computers say NU/ and then your name, right? So we're going to give this a little bit to install this last part, and then we will come back and finish up. Alright, so it appears that Windows Server is now restarting. So as I said before, once it starts back up, it should have the CIS 320/ before the administrator. And then very quickly after I pretty much connect the Windows 7 machine to the Windows Server domain that we're creating, I'll also show you how to make new users. That's a pretty important function in the realm of Windows Server, specifically domain services, Active Directory domain services. We may also get into pfSense very briefly, just how to access pfSense and the login information. Once again, it's always just good to check on your host machine. See, mine's still hovering around that 115 area, so it's not doing anything differently. You know, it's just it's hanging on, it's hanging in there. I could close Chrome. That might help the processes a little bit. It's probably a bit late in the video to do that, but So essentially what we should be able to do, and we can pretty much just do it until, keep trying it until it works, is type in this window the CIS 320.local domain. And because we've already done all the settings correctly, we've already pointed this machine at the DNS server of this, right? See, we already get it, which is cool. So essentially right now, I can log in with this machine's credentials into here, and then it'll officially join this computer to that domain, right? So I can literally type in administrator. Make sure you spell it right. Please make sure you spell it right. ADMINISTRATOR. Okay, that one. And then your password. Wait a second, and you should get a little message saying, welcome to the CIS 320.local domain. While at the same time, this one's already done. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the host key delete. And boom, that message came up. So now this computer is actually going to restart. So you got to close this. Restart now. Now when this restarts, it'll make me Control-Alt-Delete. So this is officially a part of this domain. And here's my CIS 320/administrator. So I'm going to go ahead and type my password in here. And this is going to restart. When this comes back, it's also going to make me Control-Alt-Delete and be a part of this domain. So it's going to look very similar to the computers in NU library. But this is pretty much the Windows Server is the computer that's going to be controlling this, right? And I can make as many of these machines as I want to. And with a click of a button on here, change settings that affect all those machines. So that's why this environment is really useful, right? Especially if you have to maintain, networks of hundreds of different computers. Being able to just control things from one computer is always a benefit. So the last few things I'm going to show you guys, I'll show you two more things. First of all, accessing pfSense, right? Because that's a relatively easy thing to do. You just have to go on the internet and the internet browser and type in something, and that's it. But then also adding users to this domain so that we don't have to log in with the administrator user, right? The administrator user right now is the only user that exists on this domain. So you want to add, people, just like you would in an organization. Like if you're running a business or something like that, you'd add people. That way you can keep accountability when it comes to security time. If you want to be able to see who's watching YouTube or logging into Facebook while they're at work or whatever. And obviously other things that are actually more important. So now we are still just waiting. But this one's giving me the Control-Alt-Delete, right? So if I go ahead and do my Control-Alt-Delete, my host key plus the delete key, there's the Glenn PC, right? So this is the actual host PC, the user, which really does not matter, like I said, at all. This account cannot be affected by this machine. This is pretty much the account for the machine. We don't want to use this for what we're trying to do, right? So I'm going to hit switch user, other user, and now I'm logging on to the CIS 320 domain. Okay, so right here I can put in the administrator and password, and I can actually log into this account from this computer. Okay, so that's essentially what we've just done this entire process. I don't want to do that though. I don't want to log in with the administrator. I want to wait until this loads up. We'll create another random user and then literally simultaneously log into it, and you'll see that the changes are immediate. They're right away, and we can log into this other random account. I'm just waiting for this other one to finish loading up here. Windows Server should be loading up any second. I would also like you to notice that Windows Server is now fully connected to the internet. So it claims that it has full internet access. And that was just simply because all the roles got included, so everything is currently set up and correctly set up. So we actually have full-on internet through this pfSense box, right? So pfSense is still our router, but we still have full access to the internet, which is the target goal, right? So this is still loading up a bit. I'm going to go ahead and open Internet Explorer in Windows Server. Now, it is important that you do this in Windows Server. If you try to do this in Windows 7, it may not work. Only because this is the active DNS server and just other relevant settings for how pfSense functions. You want to be contacting it from Windows Server. You might have trouble accessing it from Windows 7, but if you can get it from Windows 7, cool, you know. But essentially, like I said before, so if I just go ahead now, because remember, our pfSense box is 10.0.0.1. So if I was to simply literally type in 10.0.0.1 in here, it should not work. I should have to type in https://10.0.0.1 for me to access the web page. I will fully let you know that it will give you an error when you open this page initially. I know that there is a way to fix that error, but I really don't care about it too much for the sake that we're just in a a virtual environment. Anybody who tends to use pfSense for an actual corporate environment should really read the manual, because there's only so much I can explain in a very short video. So like I said, 10.0.0.1, if I just type that in, it should not be able to find anything. Probably derp for a little bit and just tell me that that doesn't exist in a sense. Well, it just completely undid what I was trying to do. Let's try that again. It actually did redirect me to HTTPS. So HTTPS tells me, well, hey, Internet Explorer says this is not actually HTTPS. But we understand. Continue to this website. And once this loads up, this should be pfSense. This is obviously a suspenseful moment that you're waiting to see pfSense for the first time, but I trust me when I say it is a lot nicer looking than the operating system that we used promises it to be. It's taking quite a bit to load, unfortunately, but it's just because we had a lot going on. So while that's loading, we'll just go back to Server Manager. Oh, which is actually still getting configured here. So let's let that do its thing. This should be loading up pretty shortly. Well, clearly a lot's going on for my computer right now. So it somehow looped me back to this page. Well, this is something I can do without network. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead into tools into server manager. We're actually gonna go ahead and add some users. All right, and then I'll show you how you can log in with the user here by creating a user. So one of the first options is Active Directory users and computers. We're gonna want to go ahead and click that. Do you have to wait a second for this? Meanwhile, I'll kind of see if the page is loaded up yet. I've been kind of doing this all video, but it is really good when you're doing this to multitask. Do a few things at a time while you're waiting, just because doing one task at a time, you're gonna wait regardless, but you can kind of coordinate like concurrent waiting. This is pfSense though. It's finally opened up. So for pfSense, the username the first time is literally going to be admin. It's taking a bit to show up there. But then the password is just lowercase pfSense, pfSense. No spaces, all lowercase. So it might take a second here. But it's going to go ahead and load up the initial setup wizard. Alright, so this is a little wizard, but this is also the first kind of hint you've seen pfSense, the kind of glimpse at it that you've seen. Go ahead and click next here, and then basically this is kind of saying like, hey, donate to us. We're not going to do that right now, even though we do respect their machine a lot. So we can actually set our domain in here. So remember that domain from before, right? I can actually put CIS 320.local right there. I should actually capitalize that because it was capitalized when I did it in Windows. So I'm going to capitalize that. We're going to set the DNS server, right, to be the 10.0.0.10. That is our server on the network here. But I am going to go ahead and allow the DNS servers to be overridden by DHCP on the WAN. Okay, meaning if one of my machines in here tries to get outside internet pages like Google or Yahoo or really anything outside of my house, I want the Verizon DNS servers or the ones I have set externally rather than the DNS server of this Windows server machine, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and hit next. You can leave this as is. Just go ahead and hit next again. We can configure the WAN interface. So the WAN, I'm going to leave as DHCP, and I recommend you do so as well, because most devices in NU or just generally around the world are usually DHCP. It's very rare that you'll have a static IP environment unless you're like in a corporation or office, government building, etc. Everything else here you can pretty much leave as is. Unless your network administrator that you're on tells you to do some things, like if you need to log in or something like that, right? If you're at a hotel or something weird. This last option down here actually blocks non-internet routed networks. So pretty much networks that like have private IP addresses that are coming from the outside. Like automatically that means something's wrong. Somebody's trying to hack you. Like, yeah, that's not a good thing, right? So that automatically blocks them though, which is a good little tool. Right, now here we can set the LAN, right? But we already kind of did that in our pfSense actual OS, so that's correct already. And now it's telling me I can set a password, so I'm going to literally set the password as the same password as I've set everything else as. Hit next and reload. So once this reloads, I should have to log in again. Click here to continue. And there we go. I didn't even have to log in. So here is my little dashboard for pfSense, and this is where we can get started with doing things like setting firewall rules and creating VPNs, SNMP activation, dynamic DNS, DHCP servers, UPnP, port forwarding, all that good stuff, right? But we can do it virtually, right? And the really cool thing about pfSense that I like is there's a little package manager in here. So if you go to package manager under system, go to available packages, you're gonna see a list of just like mini apps that you can install that have everything to do with just networking. A few good ones are Snort is one of my favorite ones. This is basically something that can look across your network and just tell you what is going on. So it can detect and prevent intrusions to your network. Squid is another good one. It is basically a proxy server. So you can kind of, you know, I have a daughter, so if I don't want her to, you know, go on like bad websites, I can kind of do it by keyword through the router. And then you have, I'm pretty sure there's like there's OpenVPN, which is a good thing. It pretty much automatically gives you a VPN. There's another one in here that pretty much is an antivirus. I'm trying to find it. That's one of these. Yeah, I give up. All right. But yeah, there's also an antivirus one where basically you can install antivirus on your router. So if you had this set up in a real life environment, you wouldn't have to pay for antivirus. Okay, nobody pays for it, but you wouldn't have to actually install one on every single client. You can just have one on the router, and that would automatically block things that seemed to be malware, right? But that is pfSense. So let's go ahead and close out of that. And now we're back to adding users, right? That's the last thing we want to do in this video. So here's our domain. Okay, here's our users of the domain. So I can now click users. And here are all of the users for my domain. So I can go ahead and right click this users here, hit new, and then user. So now I can actually create the information for a user. So I'm going to do it in the scheme that Niagara does it, so that you guys can kind of see what pieces of information need to go where, right? So for me, right, I'm Glenn R. Papp, and this is my name as it shows up on here, but this does not matter. Everything that's on here literally doesn't matter. That shows up when you like click the start button in Windows. Like that's like the information about that user. What really matters is what goes right here, right in this box, okay? Because that's what's going to be used for your actual login, right? So here, like for you guys, your S number would go here, right? Mine was S 0721676, I think, when I was an undergrad at Niagara. So that would be where that goes, right? So next, and now here's my password, right? So password's just going to be the same as everything else, but here's where your NU password would go. Now here on the bottom, there's a few different options. User must change password to next logon. So NU doesn't have this checked. They probably should. Pretty much this demands that I'm going to set a password for you, tell the first users their first password they should use, and then make them change their password so everybody has a different password, like by design, right? User cannot change password. I would find this a little bit sketchy, but in some scenarios it might work, right? Password never expires. Account is disabled. Obviously you don't want to have that checked. But essentially you can just keep this the way that it is. Just make sure that none of these, I would say, are checked, and hit next, and then finish. There I am, right? Cool. So now I should be able to go into Windows 7, hit my host key plus the delete key, switch user, other user. So I'm on this screen now. So now I should be able to use that. I should be able to use that S number I put in before, along with my password, to log into my new account. And it's preparing my desktop. Like I said, instantaneously, right? Just for the sake of the argument, I'm gonna wait for it to load up so you guys can see that this is actually like working, and that I should have external internet on both machines, that pfSense has been set up correctly. So I'm actually gonna test this on the Windows Server machine while this is waiting. I'm just gonna go to google.com. And meanwhile, while that loads, Windows 7 has loaded up with this new account, and it is informing me that I do have internet access, right? And just like it says NU internet access, if you've ever hovered over this, right, it's the same thing. And then here, obviously, Google's loaded up, so I do have internet there. If you do not have external internet and you are on Mac, make sure that your pfSense's WAN interface is set to NAT. Not NAT network, just NAT. Okay? But for Windows, as the host OS, it will be bridged network. But as you can tell on here as well, we do have internet, we do have working, everything like that. Like I said, there is that you know, information I put in, that Glenn RPath, my name and everything like that. It shows up there, but my actual username is still that S number. And as you can see, MSN loaded up. You know, I can go to a different website if Windows lets me here. I can go to a different website, it should load right up. So this is all working. Okay? So if anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. We will definitely cover a lot more than this as the semester progresses and things move on. But you should know how to at least do this. Okay? If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or let me know.